Let's see another example where complexity creeps into your code in Project 3. So as mentioned earlier, when you get to part 2 of the project, you're going to add an interactive keyboard mode, and you're also going to give the user the ability to move around in the world. And to do that, you need to support two different ways of providing input to your program. One is interact with input string, where you just give a hard-coded string, and the other is interact with keyboard, where the user is actually going to push buttons on their computer and see what happens as they press them. Now, being able to handle two different sources of input, one that comes from a string and one that comes from a keyboard, is a little tricky. I mean, you can do it probably, but a lot of students had a way too complicated approach. So let's see one. So in this solution below, the student basically said, okay, whenever they use interact with keyboard, I will call the method move keyboard some number of times. And whenever we are using interact with input string, the alternate way of controlling the program, we'll call move car. Now in both cases, there's the same basic idea. We collect one single character of input and then process it using code similar to what we saw before. The difference is this first line. Here we say, let's solicit one character of input from the keyboard, and over here we say, let's take the character passed in and convert it into a string. So how could we simplify this code? Now that seems like there's one very obvious answer, but what I'd like you, I mean, to me at least, but what I'd like you to do is try and really flesh out what we would need to do to improve this. What would it look like? There's lots of different ways to do this. Okay, so there's a bunch of ways you can do it. One possible way is you create a single move method with a parameter called something like input type, and then you have an if statement that says something like if type equals keyboard, call this function, otherwise call this and get a string, character from the string somehow. Now what I'm going to propose, so one obvious tricky part there is this method does not actually have the string available. So you could add a third parameter to this function that takes, so you have the world, the input type, and the string. And if the input type is use the string, then you actually use the string, something like that. The much better way of doing it is to rely on our idea of interface inheritance. So what I would do is I would create one interface called input device that has, say, a next character method, and then you'll make a single move method that takes an input device and it just calls next character as needed. And what that means is we only need one move method that you just give it an input device, and that device could actually be the keyboard, or it could be a string, or it could be something else. And if you look in the skeleton code provided, you will see there is something called input demo, which demonstrates this exact principle. Now, it might seem a little vague when you haven't worked on this project yet, but I hope that it seems useful. Now, more generally, my main suggestion to you in this whole project is to think strategically. So I found this video that I like of a dog, and here's a dog who has an idea about how to solve a problem. He has a certain set of constraints, and he is very determined to solve the problem his way. This is the student that we just looked at, right? Really trying to bend an overly complicated situation to his will. He's trying. Having a tough time. And yeah, rather than trying to work smarter, he's trying to work harder, and it's not working out for him so far. Now, I will note that eventually this dog, he will, very soon, come up with a clever idea that will help him. But it still feels like a bit of a kludge. I think that there's probably something better this dog could be doing than what you see here, and that is basically what happened when the programmer that we just saw and picked apart their code, what happened to them when they were programming tactically. So you may eventually arrive at a solution, but it's going to look like this. It's going to be painful to arrive at, and just not such a good thing. Try and be more strategic.